Though film fans may consider Alfred Hitchcock the solitary master of suspense, his wife, Alma Reville, was an essential ingredient in his success. As critic Charles Champlin wrote, "The Hitchcock touch had 4 hands, and 2 of them were Alma's."
Hitchcock fell in love with Alma Reville when he was still quite young, and they got married, and she was always by his side.
Her judgment was sacrosanct in Hitchcock's mind.
She had been in the business actually longer than he had and worked with him on his earliest pictures.
She was the center of his life.
Alma Reville and Alfred Hitchcock worked in the same British movie studio for 2 years, but he never got up the nerve to speak to her. When the studio folded and Alma was seeking employment, she received a phone call from a man who had just been promoted to assistant director on a picture called Woman to Woman. He offered her a job as editor. That was Alma Reville and Alfred Hitchcock's first conversation and the first step in a partnership that would last over 50 years.
She was the most important person in his life, there's no question of that. She was his muse, his guide. She was a collaborator on a number, especially of his early films.
Funny how you happen to meet someone and like them and like them.
She had a lot of input into a lot of movies in a lot of different ways, partly as an advisor, and on some of the films, especially in the earlier parts of his career, really hands-on activity when the films were being made.
My mother was completely working with my father from the minute he had an idea. He would talk to her because she was a writer and see if she thought it would make a movie. And if she said yes, then he'd go ahead. If she said no, he'd forget the whole thing.
That's what's so exciting about all of this. We move as one, everything together, nothing held back.
My mother knew every single bit of the movie. She knew every single bit of the script, and she was able to pick out little things that weren't right in the movie and tell my father about them.
As Hitchcock's granddaughter, Mary Stone, has said publicly, my grandmother was the most important influence, not only in his private life, but in his business life as well.
My grandmother used to tell my grandfather exactly what she felt about a movie that he's made, whether it be costumes or script or anything. And he was always so worried about what her reaction was going to be to these movies. So he showed her a final cut of Vertigo, and it was a scene with Kim Novak walking away. She said, well, the movie is absolutely wonderful. I love everything about it, but she's looking a little big in that scene walking away, and I just don't think you should have that scene in. Well, he took it as, oh my God, she hates the movie, which she didn't, but he was so worried, and all he wanted was praise and for her to really be happy with what he made. And for the longest time, he would tell people, she hates the movie, she hates the movie.
Alma had a very keen eye, not only for the structure and the plot and for performances, but she was very good at picking up errors in continuity and things that shouldn't be seen. She was the one who noticed, for example, that after Marion Crane in Psycho is dead and her body falls over the edge of the bathtub, with her eye staring open and the camera on the floor slowly reversing away from her, was Alma who saw the shot and said, but you can see the pulse in her neck. Well, you still can, because of course, they weren't about to use a dummy, that's too silly, and they weren't about to kill Janet Leigh. So there's no way of taking out the pulse in her neck. My guess is that Hitchcock felt, quite rightly, that the audience would be in such a supreme state of shock that they wouldn't look for that. They knew she was dead and wouldn't look for, carotid artery pulsing, and they didn't.
How are you?
Charlie.
Oh,
Yeah,
at first
Jolly.
I didn't know you. I thought you were sick.
Sick?
You aren't sick, are you? Look, Pop, here he is.
My grandmother's favorite movie was Shadow of a Doubt, which was also my grandfather's favorite movie.
I don't want you here, Uncle Charlie. I don't want you to touch my mother. So go away, I'm warning you. Go away or I'll kill you myself.
They had a wonderful time making this movie. He really never liked going on location, but for this, they went up to Santa Rosa, and they lived up there while he filmed the movie. And she actually worked on the script with Thornton Wilder. She loved the fact of the man being the menace coming into the nice, small, little, sweet town. And it was one of her most memorable experiences as far as making movies. My grandmother was very proud of my grandfather. They had a love story that lasted close to 54 years. She was protective of him, but she also was so proud of what he had accomplished and how he was so loved all over the world, not just in the filmmaking world. And she really tried to keep his home calm. He would come back from the studio, they would read. They didn't go out much, they didn't go to Hollywood parties much, and she wanted to keep his life at home quiet because his life away from home was so different.
What would you think of starting off with dinner at 21?
Will you have perhaps an ambulance downstairs?
Ah, better than that. 21.
My mother was a great cook, but a very simple cook. If she had company coming in, she would make dinners.
They were both always into cooking. My grandmother especially, she just had a passion for it. And because she had a passion for it, she just loved doing it. And she was home at night, she cooked at night, and a lot of times they would cook together in the kitchen.
On the 7th of July, 1928, Alma gave birth to a daughter, Patricia Alma Hitchcock.
My mom was an only child, so she traveled with my grandparents everywhere. They included her in their lives, in everything.
Hey, Daddy, you sure I've never been to Africa before? It looks familiar.
They used to, back in the 40s, 50s, throw a lot of parties, and she was always there. She was always included. She was never sent back to her room because it was the three of them.
I'm sorry we were gone so long, but we had to go over and pick up Hank.
We used to love to sit with my grandmother because she would mention her friends just very nonchalantly that we would say, oh my gosh, because we've seen them in all these movies. She loved Grace Kelly. She was a great friend of hers. Edith Head was a wonderful friend of hers, and Edith would dress her in the most exquisite outfits. She loved Ingrid Bergman. Cary Grant, she said she used to swoon every single time she saw him. It wasn't bragging. It was just the way it was, and she wanted us to know what it was like back in the 40s, the 50s, when we were obviously not here or too young to know.
I love you, Madeline.
I love you too. Too late.
No, we're together.
Alfred Hitchcock's reliance on Alma was legendary. When she contracted cancer shortly before the premiere of Vertigo, the normally unflappable Hitchcock broke down and threatened to throw himself from a window. Fortunately, Alma's treatment was a success, and the movie-making marriage continued for another 2 decades.
I was with him once. I brought a copy of one of his wonderful silent films, a comedy based on a play called The Farmer's Wife. We sat, just the two of us, and they screened The Farmer's Wife. But at one point during the screening, the little telephone rang in the screening room next to his chair, and he picked it up and listened for a minute and put it down and jumped up and said, "I have to go home, Madame wants me."
From California, the American Film Institute salute to Alfred Hitchcock.
My grandfather received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the AFI in March of 1979, and it was a full ballroom of everyone who just adored him. And he gave up to give his speech, and we assumed it was going to be thanking all the thousands of people he had worked with. And he said,
I beg permission to mention by name only 4 people who have given me the most affection, appreciation, and encouragement, and constant collaboration. The first of the four is a film editor. The second is a scriptwriter. The third is the mother of my daughter Pat. And the fourth is as fine a cook as ever performed miracles in a domestic kitchen. And their names are Alma Revilla.
They were born in England only hours apart, and when they died, it was within 2 years of each other. Their bodies were cremated, and their ashes spread in the Pacific Ocean. As in life, so it was in death. Alma Reville and Alfred Hitchcock, together.